I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage debateist. All right, today we're going to start out with some random news information, data points. Here we go. There is a new song out from a band. Actually, a couple. It's a group. I think that they may have been on one of those skill contest kind of shows. But the two artists are Black Griffin and Basic, Baasik, and they have a song about Bikini Bottom, which is where SpongeBob lives, if you didn't know, called La 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 Live, and it's awesome. It's a wonderful song about zombies taking over Bikini Bottom. So if you didn't know that, now you know. You're well informed. Eggnog is an incredibly wonderful kind of a holiday creamer for your coffee. It is a wonderful thing to put in just, black coffee. It doesn't make it black anymore. It turns the coffee into a different color. But eggnog is a wonderful creamer. Stranger Things season 5 just came out recently, and it's quite wonderful. They're doing a good job. The second half is going to release in December, and I'm excited about that. This last week was a good week. It was a busy week and a kind of a tiresome week, but the counseling went really well. The supervision went well. The parenting went well. There's been some cool rhythms of parenting this last week. We've been doing this thing where after number 5 goes down for the night around 7:00, there's just this like little window where playtime happens. So giving, 20, 30, 40 minutes to play, to read, to do all sorts of different fun activities. And it's definitely made a difference. It's been fun, and I think that the girls are really enjoying spending that time. And I enjoy the time too. Playing with your kids is one of those things that you would think is a natural, automatic blessing. However, I have found it to be difficult to play in such a way that both of us are enjoying the play. Now, obviously, my enjoyment of the play matters less, but the problem with writing off my enjoyment or your own enjoyment when you're trying to like connect and play with your kids is if you're not enjoying the time that you're spending with them, then that's obviously sending a message, and they're absorbing portions of that lack of enjoyment. And that's not good. That's unfortunate, and obviously won't have long-term positive effects. And so I've had to think about, what does it mean to set myself right so that I can actually really enjoy the time that we're playing? And with lots of practice, I feel like I'm getting better at being a good playmate. And so the time is more fun, and you want to do more of it, whether it be, let's see, what did we play this week? We played hide and seek. Oh, that was the other random announcement. There's this amazing dice game. It's kind of like Yahtzee / Munchkin, because you got a character that you're playing with health points, and yeah, it's like a Yahtzee Munchkin kind of crossover, and there's cards involved, and there's a bunch of different characters. It's called Dice Throne. So the kids and I have been playing a bunch of that this week, and it's been a lot of fun. So, well, actually, not this month. We've been playing it for the last month. I'm a little bit obsessed, actually. We've already got 4 characters, but I think the girls and I want a few more characters to play with. So, anyways, today we're going to go back into looking at development within the marriage. And one thing I was thinking about as I was prepping up for today's episode was, what is development? Like, genuinely, like, what does that mean? So I just kind of started writing words out, and this is what I came up with. Development is the process of growing and learning across time that leads to maturity, mastery, or competence. So the development is the process of growing and learning across time that leads to maturity, mastery, or competence. I didn't look this up. I didn't look up a definition because what I wanted to do was see if my own mind could come up with a definition of development the way that I understand what development is and means. Because I felt like there would be more value in challenging myself to kind of come into a place of knowledge and understanding that wasn't just something that I read on a dictionary or on a website or asked ChatGPT to kind of fill in that blank. Those words that they would have given me would have been a definition of development, but they wouldn't necessarily have been something that I thought about or felt through. Not that you can just feel about something or think about something the right way and then come up with the right answer. However, I think that this is, from my understanding of development and the process, I think this is a pretty solid place to start. And obviously, in the future, we can continue to update, upgrade, change this definition. But I think it's a good place to start. So let's just repeat it one more time, and then we're going to kind of talk about some of the elements of the definition. So development is the process of growing and learning across time that leads to maturity, mastery, or competence. The process of growing. We all acknowledge that development is a process of growing when you are very small, because that process has very, very clear steps, stages, skills that come as a result of the growth, different things that young babies are learning. There's the opening of the eyes and then the lifting of the heads. There's the rolling over can be a big moment, when they first roll over. So there's all of these growth and learning kind of metrics that occur over time, right? And so that's the across time part. When I was thinking about development, I was thinking about all the different things that we can choose to develop. Recently, my brother invited me, well, I guess that's not exactly accurate. A very long time ago, my brother invited me to play volleyball with him, and I have refused up until recently when I finally was able to say yes. We've been playing volleyball for the last month and a half maybe together, and I have played volleyball with him before, and it's been amazing to watch him play because his skill has kind of been, it's grown in a really cool way. So watching him play has become very much fun. His wife is really, really good at volleyball and has played, I think, for a very long time. And a lot of people that we're playing against are also quite skilled. They have skills that I don't have. They've developed beyond a point that I'm currently at. And so it's been really fun to watch and learn and observe different levels of skill in the game of volleyball. And the more that I do it, the more that I observe these people and then play myself, the more opportunities that I'm giving myself to learn and grow over time. I was thinking about developing into a career. I was thinking about counseling, and I was thinking about how it took probably the first 4 years of counseling in order for me to feel like I was starting to understand what my job was and how to do it well. a lot of the imposter syndrome faded at that point, and what I knew became much more clear. And when I was confident in knowing what I knew was when I could more skillfully present the relationship of counseling and the educational parts of the counseling and the relational, I already said the relational parts of the counseling. They're very important. It's okay to say them twice. But all of those different parts, as I learned about counseling, there was a course of development, the across time part of at least 4 years before I felt somewhat competent in knowing what I could do in the counseling relationship, what I couldn't do in the counseling relationship, and then seeking to kind of live in that area of this is what I can do, this is what counseling is really good at, really good for, and then not trying to do all sorts of different things that counseling just really is ineffective and doesn't touch. When I thought about development, I thought about finances, and I thought about early in Becca and my finances, we had nothing. And we went through this developmental process of first seeking knowledge, which is the learning part, right? So we were growing kind of regardless of our learning. We were growing as people, even just like physically, time is passing and our age is increasing over time. So we're growing. The learning part is we're exposed to, taught, or shown different ideas, different opinions, different perspectives on finances. So for me, I took Dave Ramsey's course, Financial Peace University. I think I was maybe 21 when I did it. And I grew up to the age of 21, but I didn't necessarily have any skills. I didn't know that much about like managing finances or managing a household. And with that learning, it kind of dumped into me at the age of 21 across maybe like 8 or 9 weeks of the course. All of a sudden, my learning and my growth kind of shot me into this next developmental stage or season that equipped Rebecca and I to build up and increase our maturity of like how we were approaching finances, our mastery of how to get the money where it needs to go in the different categories that it should be in, and competence in the execution and the skill of making sure everything is paid, and making sure that everything is paid on time, making sure that there's enough to take care of all of the responsibilities, making sure the responsibilities were reasonable and manageable, and continue to find ways of cutting back and keeping our lifestyle low. And that the work that we did early on in our finances, kind of setting that stage or that foundation of budgeting, mindfulness, telling our money where to go, has built up a competence within us and our system of having financial conversations, having planning kinds of conversations for the future, and just basically working together, creating kind of a partnership dynamic. Early on, we were really young. A lot of our conversations were a little bit strained because one of us is less financially minded than the other. One of us is much less willing to engage in financial conversations. And so there was kind of a disconnect early on. And so we were able to develop beyond that over time as Becca kind of saw the results of the planning and the budgeting, and we were able to get some wins under our belt. And I think paying off all of our debt was really helpful. I think making sure that we had vehicles, at the different times that were reasonable and that we could afford, but we could also take care of. And then obviously our living situation changing over time. All of those different metrics, I think, built trust into the system and allowed development to take place. So development is the process of growing and learning across time that leads to maturity, mastery, and competence. And it occurs within us naturally, as in stages of development, such as early childhood development, but also it occurs within us in the areas of how we work at work, how we operate our finances, how we are as parents. We didn't even touch that one, but we've had to develop a crazy amount, probably the most out of anything that we've done, we've developed as parents over the course of the last 10 and some years. But the point is that we're always developing in all sorts of different ways and areas. And marriage just happens to be one of the things in our lives that we need to develop in. The process of learning about and growing into your marriage across time that leads to maturity, mastery, and competence. Just like all the other areas that we as people need development in, marriage is one of those other things that we have to be intentional about developing in. And there's probably a more compelling way of saying that. But if marriage is just one of the many things that we need to develop in, and we can understand it as not something that naturally occurs within us, it's not something that you're just going to be able to do great and do right off the bat. Not saying you need lots of partners to be married to in order to grow in it. Actually, I think that marriage can be better the opposite way, right? Just practicing the art of marriage on a day-to-day basis and building up and growing in your practice of marriage, the art, building the maturity and the mastery and the competence, right? So it's just one of the many things that we're going to need to develop across our lifespan. It's not this unique thing, this thing outside of the norm that is exceptional. It's actually a part of the rule that we all need to be developing in the things that matter to us across time, growing in, learning about, so that we can be mature masters, competent masters of marriage. And master is actually the word that the Gottmans use when they were doing their Love Lab studies. They were using the term marriage masters. They had mastered, right, the skills. They had developed in their maturity and in their competence around what marriage requires in order for you to be really good at it. In order for you to be really good at your finances, you're going to need a plan. Some people call it a budget. Some people call it an app. Some people do it on spreadsheets. But you're going to need a plan. In order to develop as a volleyball player, you're going to need, lots of practice and time and probably good coaching, right? Like the learning part. And you're going to need all sorts of different things that's going to lead to you becoming a mature volleyball player rather than an infant volleyball player, right? Somebody who's slapping the net and Yeah, and just making lots of mistakes. It's okay to make lots of mistakes, and it's okay to be in the early stages of development. Now, in no area of development is it comfortable to be in the earliest stages. It's not comfortable to be an infant and have all these needs that need to be met and to not know, like not to be able to say anything about them. And then, the people around you may or may not meet some of those needs. It's not comfortable to be early on in your development of your math skills and to be making lots of mistakes. And it's not comfortable to try and learn to read. It's not comfortable to try and become a better volleyball player. It's not comfortable to try something new or different. It's not comfortable to do those things. To be underdeveloped, to not have developed, to be immature, to not have competencies. Those are all things that I think make us very uncomfortable and can lead to a lot of shame and inadequacy, a lot of fear around developing as people, because it's not comfortable to develop. And these skills are surrounded by an environment. Marriages are surrounded by this environment of pressure, of stress, of difficulty. It's one of the only relationships that is just as hard as it is good. Like a great friendship is not that hard, and it's really wonderful. If you have a healthy parent in your life and they're loving on you, it's not that hard to like maintain or manage. But like marriage is ridiculously difficult just as much as it is wonderful. And developing the skills of marriage can be very uncomfortable, just like learning how to play golf. Oh boy. Yeah, I tried that one time and it didn't go that well. It was interesting. So it's okay to be uncomfortable early on in one's development, because it is natural to feel inadequate and down and discouraged and defeated when you're early on and you're still developing the skills that you're going to need in order to master, in order to mature, in order to become competent in your marriage. The process of growing and learning. So when you talk about learning, there are different opportunities for learning that occur across time. You're going to learn and absorb marriage by watching your parents. So first and foremost, your kind of first intro to marriage course that you take is always, what does your parents' marriage look like? After that marriage, you're exposed to that one. You may, growing up, be exposed to other marriages, right? So, a really good friend of mine came over today. He and his wife and a bunch of his children. He didn't leave any out. All of his children were actually there. And so we hung out, and my kids got to observe another marriage, albeit, they didn't observe much about it. They didn't really see it in action, but they were able to witness, other adults interacting that were married. They get to do that in different community settings. They go to school and they see a husband and wife doing teaching together. They go to church and they see, husbands and wives and different marriages. They have uncles and aunts who are married, and they show kind of a glimpse of what marriage is. All of those things they see very kind of seldom, few and far between. And our marriage, Becca and my marriage, they see every day through the thick and thin and the ups and downs and the hard parts and all of it. And so they're absorbing so much of what marriage is just by looking at it, by seeing it done, and by processing on whatever level they, in the other areas of development, they can. So obviously number 5, coming up on 2, is not processing the marriage at a very deep level. But number 1, coming up on 11 is definitely absorbing, even if she's not thinking about it, even if she's not, knowing what she's absorbing. She doesn't necessarily understand or isn't conscious of the absorption, but the absorption is there. And so she's learning, right? She's learning and growing about what marriage is already. As we get into middle school and high school, our learning about marriage, I think, almost takes a step backwards, because if marriage is a committed, long-term romantic relationship, a lot of middle school and high school is trying out whatever developmentally romantic means, trying out relationships, but not for the sake of like marriage necessarily, more so for the sake of exhilaration, physiological reasons, for all sorts of different reasons we engage in these, relationships that aren't real, and they don't necessarily, I don't know. I guess I don't really know. There's a season there of like learning and growing through practicing relationships, but it's just not entirely valuable because of the other areas of development. One isn't necessarily able to like draw and grow and mature in the marital area because it's not appropriate yet. And that's part of the reason why teenagers and teen pregnancies and teen engagements and teen, it's so hard on one's life. Teen motherhood, it's to be forced to develop in that specific way at that specific time when all of these other areas of development are not quite where they need to be in order to set this development on it. It becomes extremely difficult, like life on hard mode, and it has all sorts of different consequences for one's life. And that's why developing in marriage and developing in parenthood is actually really, it's quite important, like the timing around it, because the timing around it does have an implication on one's early experience of it. Not necessarily condemning them to a future of lacking maturity, mastery, and competence, but starting early creates a barrier maybe to, it creates a lot of extra stress in the system that has to be overcome in order for mastery to take place. It can still happen, for sure. There's plenty of hope. But the amount of work that it takes to grow in that area while you're also, struggling to grow in other areas is very difficult. But I would also say that like entering into marriage too late in life, when your sense of self has kind of solidified too far, and then you're asking your already solidified system to adjust to this other person, that also can create problems. It can create issues within the relationship and within development over time. And I've seen a bunch of those different cases where marriages were entered into later on in life and how that can be really difficult as well. Sometimes changing and morphing and growing together, if there's lots of commitment and if there's a foundation of shared values, that can be really good. However, when you think about those systems being more rigid and less flexible, that can create some problems later on down the road. So we're learning and growing and being taught and shown, but there becomes a point later on in development, maybe early 20s, where the idea of marriage and the skills of marriage and the stages of marriage and what marriage is probably ought to be taught and practiced, whether it be kind of like communication skills, connection skills, understanding what it means to engage in a marriage, understanding what a man is, understanding what a woman is, understanding what sex is, understanding the ins and the outs of finances and home management and life management in these later stages when you are committed to a long-term romantic relationship. It's one of these things in our world that isn't necessarily ever taught to anybody, that like, this is how a marriage operates. This is how it functions. These are the appropriate skills. These are the stages or the developmental moments that you're going to experience across time as you move toward your marriage. And so I think that education around marriage is actually really important. And if we can get education around marriage really like up to snuff, like really, really down pat, if we can get education into the eyes and the ears and the feels of young people, I think that they may have a better end result and may develop and mature more quickly, because knowledge is so powerful when it comes to marriage. And I'll give you a quick example of that, right? So I teach people a lot of different marital principles, marital skills, how marriages function or tend to function, what's normal in a marriage, what's abnormal in a marriage, and like all the nuance of how the different parts of the system impact the marital system. So much of what I do is sharing new information or new perspective on life so that the person can learn and grow across time and build a sense of maturity, master, skill, competence. And the learning part of that, like, we're always kind of growing because time is taking place. But just because we're growing doesn't necessarily mean that we're learning. And just because we're growing and learning doesn't necessarily mean that we're applying those things to our lives so that our lives can mature, so that we can build those competencies. And so I think that education is one of the most important things between the ages of 18 and 25 that we could give to people to say, hey, this is what this is. This is all the benefits of it. It's really a beautiful thing. It really is the best kind of relationship that you can have in your entire life if, and only if, you're willing to put in the work of growing and learning across time so that you can become a master of it. If you value it enough to want to become a master of it, if you're going to commit to it enough to become a master of it, right? Just like volleyball or tennis or golf or whatever, like if you want to become a master of these things, you're going to need to put in a ridiculous amount of time and energy and money and training and coaching and all of these things in order for mastery to take place. If you're going to be really good in your finances or really good at your job, you're going to need to put in some time and effort and energy and focus in order to achieve a level of mastery or competence. And commitment to that process of learning and growing is one of the most important parts of vetting a spouse. Because of all of the nuance and all of the difficulty around building competence in marriage, commitment becomes extremely important because it's a grueling process. If you're going to find the success that you want to be able to find, it can be a very grueling process of learning and growing and setting the system up so that it can sustain itself over time. So I would say that like mastery is almost the application of learning as and the end result of growing across time, that you would master these things. So now there are two kind of ideas that we need to talk about maybe next time, if I remember that this is about what we're supposed to be talking about next time, which would be the different stages of development that we engage in, and then the different skills that correspond with or correlate with the stages that we find throughout marriage. And if we could really identify the different stages that people go through and all of the skills that they need in order, the skills or maybe the education or learning that needs to take place in each of the stages, then we could kind of prescribe actions, activities, etc., that would help them to move from where they are into the next stage, like a progression, a scaffold, if you're an education person. That would really help people. And then the other thing that you could do scientifically, which would be kind of fun, is if we had a really clear set of stages and skills to apply to those stages, different theories on the stages, right? And then the different theories on the skills that you need in each of those stages. What you could do is you could develop therapeutics, you could develop different exercises, or basically, I just want to say like things that people can do, but there's like a fancy term for it. A fancy term for things that people can do, exercises, etc., that they can utilize, that have been tested, that have been shown to increase intimacy, increase levels of connection, increase, etc., the different things that we're looking to increase within the different stages. And we could study, hey, this helps, 85% of people who try this seems to really help. Probably never that number, just because there's so many different kinds. But if everybody is in the same stage that you're like trying to hit of the marital relationship, then maybe you could develop really strong interventions for those different stages that build the skill and provide the insight and provide the knowledge and understanding, and then provide opportunities to practice and become mature and become a master of those different skills within the different stages. And that would set people up for success across a long period of time. And it would also equip them to get to a point in their marriage where the work kind of slows down or transforms, and it's less of a grind, I would say, and it's more of like a huge blessing that you've achieved a certain level now, and now you, because of the work that you've done and because of the maturing and the growing that you've done, you just get to reap the benefits, the beautiful benefits of a stable marital relationship across the lifespan. And that would be an incredible gift to give anybody. So we're going to talk about stages and skills next time and see if we can kind of come to an understanding of what are the stages, what are the skills, what do we find really regularly in people's experience of marriage, so that we can move them from where they are and help them to understand where they are and move toward mastery and competency in their marriages. Period. Booyah. This is the end. Thank you so much for listening. 5 stars everywhere. And we hope you have a Merry Christmas, I guess. But there's probably going to be another episode before Christmas anyways, so we don't have to really say that. Okay. Goodbye.
and I got all I need.